It's all about the data, the richest set of data, and is able to analyze that data. It's all about the data.
The data suggests
It's all about the data.
All of the science and all of the data says
the data suggests
It's all about the data.
One, two, three, four.
Hey guys, tonight we're going to be in James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. A while back, I think we did a study in James in verses 1 through 4 of chapter 1, and it was really good. And so I want to just make sure we continue to follow up and get into something that's going to be something that we can follow along. I think one of the cool things about about going through the scriptures is that what happens is that you let the scriptures kind of tell you what you should be thinking, rather than whatever explaining what's ever on your heart or what's on my heart or Todd's or Colin's or whoever's teaching. We're going to let the scripture speak into certain areas of our lives, and sometimes when that happens, what you'll find is that you'll hit on areas that you might not otherwise. So, anyway, here we go. James chapter 5, James chapter 1, verse 5. If anyone of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith and no doubting, or with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, but he's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So I'm going to hit on 4 different aspects of this passage pretty quickly here. The need, the action, the caveat, the possible disaster. So here we go. He says, if anyone lacks wisdom.
Analyze that data. It's all about the data.
And I think the funniest part of this passage is if. Everybody lacks wisdom. I mean, that's like a common problem that we're all experiencing. So as we think about what James is saying, remember, James is likely the head of Christianity as it was known at the time. He was in Jerusalem, and he's this guy who's like a friend who tells it like it is. And I don't know if you have any friends like that, just people who will tell you things you need to hear, people who will really speak into your life, good things, encourage things, but also things that might be somewhat challenging. So for these early Christians, needing wisdom and how to live this life of faith is probably pretty typical. It's typical for us. I think they're in the same place that we are, that it's always a challenge for the people of God to figure out how to live in the times that they're at, not being like the culture around them. And like for the early Christians, they were just a small group. I mean, they were so small, and they were, severe minority. So we in the Northwest are kind of like that. Not so much. I mean, there's a lot of Christians in the Northwest, but we definitely are at a little bit of a minority. Now, wisdom is something, like I said, we all need. Now, if you feel like you don't need God's help to figure stuff out, it's probably likely because you're just stupid. And I mean, that's just the way it is. If you're living a stupid life, then you're not even going to want or need God's wisdom. You're not going to see the need for that. But if you're following Christ and you're trying to figure out what it is to live in the kingdom of God in these times, it's going to require some wisdom on your behalf. All right. So now, wisdom is something that should mark a follower of Jesus. That's something that we got to hold really high in regard. In Proverbs, the writer of the Proverbs states that wisdom is like a part of the nature of God. It's like another name for God. So when you're being a follower of Jesus, it means that you don't live like everybody else. You're living out a plan. You're living out God's plan, and we need wisdom to tap into that, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with knowledge, but wisdom is a different thing. And I think a lot of young Christians are going to tend toward, if they get zealous, what happens is they tend toward wanting to accumulate knowledge, especially theological knowledge. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But you got to know that one of the most annoying things in the world is to have somebody who's like a Bible geek. a Bible geek, but isn't somebody who has got the character and the life and the love and the passion and the fruit in their life to back it up. So, it's all knowledge, but so little wisdom.
Analyze that data. It's all about the data.
So the question is, how do we get it? How do we get this thing? And the answer, according to James, is so simple. It's so simple that it shows how unwise we are. Basically, we get it by asking for it. And so that's like a big duh moment, right? You get wisdom by asking for it. Now, this is interesting. It kind of reminds me of water a little bit. I don't know if you've ever been, working outside, and maybe you've been on a mission trip with us and going down to Mission, Mexico. And you're starting to work in the heat, and, there's always somebody who's saying, oh, you got to hydrate, you got to get a lot of water. But what happens is that you just kind of get into things, and you think, I'm not thirsty. So after a while, you start to lag. Your body starts to lag. And then you can actually feel kind of bummed out and like super unmotivated. And then you may start feeling sick. And all the while, what's happening is you're getting dehydrated. Even if there's water all over the place, and you might have your cute little water bottle that you've maybe you don't have it anymore because you left it in the youth room, and I've thrown it away because I've thrown away no less than 50 of these things because people leave them all over the place. There wouldn't be any space for any of you in Yak if I kept all the water bottles. But, so the thing that God says is just ask. If you don't have wisdom, ask for it. And it's really a simple thing. When you're working and you're thirsty, and even if you're not thirsty and it's hot, you need water. If you're living for Christ, whether you know it or not, you need wisdom. Now, this is one of those cool things, that this whole thing about asking for it is this very simple, neat promise. In James 4:2, it says, you desire and don't have, so you murder. You covet and don't obtain, so you fight and quarrel. And then James, this same one, we're going to be in this passage in not too long. You do not have because you don't ask. And then Jesus said in Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. And, I hate giving like real simplistic bonehead kind of advice. But we have to ask ourselves this. Are we muddling through our lives, getting bummed out about things we should just simply and directly go to God and ask Him for? It's cool that I think the kind of the nuance of this thing, the thing that I think sometimes we don't get, is we're supposed to, like, when we're in a situation that's kind of like really kind of taxing us and testing us, we're to ask God for wisdom and not necessarily the answer, right? Does that make sense? Essentially, we're asking for the tool versus for God to finish the project. We're asking for a sledgehammer rather than for God to knock down this wall. And then He wants to give you the sledgehammer so that you can finally get to the business of knocking down the walls in your life. Verse 6 says, let him ask in faith with no doubting. In asking for stuff, you've got to ask for it in a certain way, right? This is the caveat, the thing you have to be warned about with this, that it's not just like, oh, whatever, let's just ask God. But there's a certain kind of asking that He wants us to have. He says, let him ask in faith with no doubting. Faith is this common word in the New Testament that is pisteo, pistis. It's like a lot of different kinds of, conjugations of that word, but it means confidence, fidelity, or confidence. It has a lot of that kind of meaning, sticking close to God. And then no doubting. It's this Greek word diakrino, which means no wavering, no division, wavering, division, none of that. So basically it talks about this whole idea I don't know if you've heard this term, putting all your eggs in one basket. That means, you know, and if you were on a farm, I suppose, and maybe we don't even know what this means, but, you know, instead of being safe and saying, okay, I'm going to put my eggs in this basket, in case I drop one of them, then these eggs will be safe. You put all your eggs in one basket, and then it's like, if it goes down, they all go down. And that's kind of what we got to do with God. It means jumping in and asking God in such a way that if God doesn't come through, then you're sunk. That's the big and constant risk of faith. And faith is a risk. Faith, and that's why a lot of us shy away from it, because we're not willing to really risk. We're always playing it safe. And you know, I got to say, you cannot play it safe and be a follower of Jesus. You can't. It can't be done. And this is one of those things we've got to be, you know, like asking God in faith with no wavering. It's kind of talking about making yourself vulnerable to God. So you're not going to spend all your time calling around all your friends and getting a group consensus of all the idiots in your life about what you should be doing. You know, that's the weird thing about asking all your friends. Most of your friends have no more life experience, and maybe some less, and then some of them don't even have the ability to tap into this wisdom that James is talking about here. But we're asking them for, you know, advice when they're just as lost as we are. Okay, and you're not going to go read blogs or, you know, I know nobody reads books, self-help books anymore, but you're not going to read stuff and try to get all this kind of information. What you're going to do is you're going to put yourself in a place where you just ask God. I mean, you simply just ask Him. It's not like you're trying to kind of jam God's wisdom into you. You're just asking Him, saying, God, would you please give me wisdom? And then if He doesn't do it, you're sunk. That's the great thing about faith. If God doesn't come through, your life is going to be a stupid wreck, okay? This is what's required of you. To give God the confidence that He's definitely earned, to risk and to go all in. Now, the potential disaster doesn't come from risking all and jumping in, and then, but, you know, I mean, that's kind of a risk. We gotta go for the risk of going all the way in. But the disaster is not going to come from going all in. It's gonna come from going halfway. And James says, "For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." Okay. When I was a kid, my dad had a sailboat, and Todd knows about this. Todd knows I'm not really fond of sailboats. Because we would go out every weekend, and we'd hang out on the sailboat, and I wanted to hang out with all my friends, but, you know, my dad wanted us to go sailing with him, so we'd go sailing. And I remember one time, one of the greatest things that ever happened in my whole sailing experience was when we were untying the lines, which I would have called ropes, but apparently they're called lines. You untie the lines from the whatever they are, the holder things on the dock. Todd can answer that question, what that is. You untie it and you throw it on there, and then you get the boat going, and then you jump on the boat and go. Well, my dad was doing that, you know, and we were actually, for some reason, on the dock. He was taking the lines off the holder thing. He threw one on, then he went down to over the bow. That's the front of the boat, right? And then he takes that one off, and he throws it. But the boat begins to kind of go out a little bit. So he goes and he takes a step onto the boat. He's got, you know, 1 foot on the boat, 1 foot on the dock, and he's trying to grab something to kind of bring it back in. And what ends up happening is the boat just keeps going farther and farther and farther. And my dad wasn't very flexible, but he started like this, and he started going this and this and this. And pretty soon, he was basically doing the splits. And he had to choose one way or the other. And at one point, he could have chosen, jump back to the dock, jump back over to the boat. But what he did is he didn't choose anything. And then he just ended up flopping right down in the water. Okay. What does that have to do with anything? Doing it halfway. Having one foot in the world and having one foot with Jesus is gonna be problematic. And what happens is that, and James talks about, is that you're going to be tossed around by everything. It's a picture of a wave, and this wave is not solid. It's a wave that's just being hit by wind, and it's just fluffing all around and turbulent. It's being driven by everything around it, by the winds in particular here. Are we that way? Do we tend to live our lives driven by, different things, cultural ideas, doubts, peer pressure, and they just kind of move us along? We gotta get to the place that we're gonna go and put our stakes in God. We're gonna risk and trust that His ways are good, and trust that we can get wisdom from Him. Now, if we're content with like one foot on each, and we give in and let our lives being run by the world around us and the forces around us, you can't imagine that God's going to honor that. If you're running your life as much by, the politics of the world around you, or, the music of the world around you, the ideas that come through the stuff we watch. I think a good example is like our morality, like what is right and what is wrong. And I think a lot of us, we watch things and we do things watch things and maybe we listen to things that we know are wrong, but we do it anyway. And then we change our values to match what we like, rather than change what we like to match our values, to match the things that God says are right and true. And if we're like that, you can't imagine for a moment to think that God's going to honor that. And that's why I think it's ridiculous when people say, I've tried that Christianity thing, but it didn't work. I tried Jesus, but it doesn't work. They may say that, or they may not say that. But they actually live this kind of idea out. And James is telling us straight up, this will not work unless you're all in. Christianity will be a failure in your life unless you're willing to go all in. You're not, tossed this way and that way, unstable, the double-minded man. But you're developing this muscle of faith, this muscle of confidence in God, choosing to be confident in God, and denying the tendency to doubt. I think some of us, we begin to doubt and we just throw ourselves into it. We've got to learn to deny that. And again, that's kind of a muscle. And maybe some of us, we start to fall away and then we entertain the idea of falling away. At some point, you just got to say, no, I'm not going to fall away. I'm going to be true and confident in Jesus Christ. I'm going to be true to God. And that's the kind of thing that develops that godly character in us that we so need. Otherwise, you end up being, like James says, a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And this double-minded is interesting. It's psychos, two psyches, two lives, two-faced. Now, what this creates is someone who's staggering around, unstable in all his ways, like a drunk person. It's like a life that can't stand. Now, God's ways are going to make you strong. God's ways, if you risk it, God's ways are going to make you firm, solid, and strong. And God wants you to stand out, not just because you believe different things, but because your life has got a different texture to it, right? That you're stable when everybody else around you is unstable. That you've got direction when other people are lost. That you have wisdom both for your own life, but also for the world around you. So that's this whole thing that James is bringing us to, and it all has to do with our situation of lacking wisdom from God and needing wisdom in our lives, and then just simply, I mean, it's like, I guess there's a choice to be made, but it is really simple, the answer, which is just simply asking God. Okay, here's the questions for small groups. What's your go-to song? What's your go-to song, band, or playlist, and why? Okay, so that's like our softball question. But is there a song that you find yourself gravitating toward over and over, or a band, or a playlist, and then why? I mean, just take a little bit of time. Why is that? Why does that? As we were talking about on Wednesday night, why does that stir your cocoa? Okay, and then here's the next question: what's one area of your life that you find you need God's wisdom or direction, or you need Him to help you to figure something out? Okay. So what's one area of your life that you find yourself in need of wisdom, direction, or you just need to figure something out? And then the last question is this: are there any areas of your life that you think are unstable? What are those areas? What's an area of your life that you find is unstable? And then what do you do about that according to what we've read tonight? What do you do about that instability in your life? All right. God bless you guys.
The data suggests
It's all about the data.
All of the science and all of the data says
the data suggests
It's all about the data.